All right, so we're back for another deep dive, and today we're going to be tackling a case that's, I mean, it's both intriguing and disturbing, right? The murder of Jason Hamrich.
Yeah,
Now, you were kind enough to share some court documents and some pretty in-depth investigative reports with me, and I mean, our mission today is to really go beyond just the headlines.
right.
We're not just going to look at who did it, but the how and the why.
Yeah,
And also, I think what's really important with this case is the impact that it had on everyone involved. I mean,
absolutely. And that's
yeah,
what struck me is when you look at this case from the outside,
yeah,
you see this picture perfect life, right?
right.
Jason and Angelina Hamrich, they built this life together.
Hmm.
Jason was, decorated Air Force officer.
Yeah.
He was stationed in South Korea when he met Angelina.
Okay.
She was originally from Russia.
Hmm.
And, she seemed to embrace that military life. They started a family. They had 3 boys. And then eventually Jason's, he wanted to be closer to family
Yeah.
back here in Indiana.
Yeah.
So they made the move. You look at it, you think, oh, the American dream, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
But as we know, things were not as idyllic as they appeared.
Yeah. And their story takes a really dark turn pretty quickly. So we're talking what, 2018?
Yeah, 2018, the cracks in their marriage are beyond repair.
Right.
Jason files for divorce. He's granted custody of their sons. But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Despite the divorce proceedings, Angelina continued to live in the same house with Jason and the kids.
So they're separated,
They're separated.
but still under the same roof.
Right.
Now, I mean, that's got to be, I can't even imagine.
Yeah, you would think, initially you might think, oh, maybe it's financial struggles. Maybe it's, childcare issues. But you have to consider the potential for conflict in a situation like that.
Hmm.
You're living in close quarters with someone you're divorcing. Custody's involved.
Oh, especially with custody involved.
Yeah, it creates this pressure cooker environment.
Absolutely. And it seems like, that pressure cooker reached a boiling point in June of 2019 when Jason just vanished.
Yeah.
And, it was actually his parents who initially contacted the police
Right.
after their grandson had mentioned that he hadn't seen his dad in several days.
And you sent me that body cam footage
Oh, yeah.
from that initial welfare check.
It's chilling.
Oh, it's so chilling. And that's when you see the first red flags appear, right?
Yeah.
Angelina's demeanor is, let's just say it's bizarre.
It is, yeah.
You can hear it in her voice. She's almost nonchalant. When she's telling these officers that, oh, Jason's gone on a business trip,
Right.
she offers these flimsy excuses for his absence.
Yeah.
And she shows very little concern for his well-being. You can almost sense that the officers are picking up on this too.
Yeah, she's like weirdly calm,
Right.
which, I mean, who knows? Maybe that's just how she deals with.
Sure.
I don't know.
Yeah, you never know.
But it's just very, like, almost too calm.
Yeah. And that initial search of the house, it didn't offer much in the way of clues either.
Right.
No signs of a struggle. Jason's clothes are there. His car is there. His wallet's even on the dresser.
But his phone's gone.
His phone and his gun are missing.
See, that's the thing that's what gets me is the gun. Because now
It's a huge clue.
you're thinking, okay, is this a suicide?
Right.
But then the wallet doesn't really add up, right?
No, it makes that scenario less likely. And it's, it's one of those classic investigative dilemmas.
Totally.
Is this a missing person case?
Or is there something more sinister?
Exactly.
And, well, we know the answer to that question sadly comes just a few days later
Yeah.
when some neighbors discover Jason's body.
Yeah, less than a mile from his home.
Yeah, like just in a ditch.
In a ditch.
And he had been shot in the head.
And the autopsy findings, those add even more pieces to this puzzle. So the gunshot residue suggests that it was a close-range shot,
Oh.
but his clothing was torn.
Hmm.
And there were post-mortem injuries that indicate that his body was dragged to that ditch.
Oh, wow.
So now you have to ask yourself, where did the murder actually take place?
Right.
Because pinpointing that true crime scene, that's vital in any homicide investigation.
Absolutely. So while the police are trying to piece together all this physical evidence, Angelina's behavior just continues to get stranger and stranger.
Right.
I mean, she is cold. She's detached when they tell her about Jason's death. She even refused to look at photos.
And, it's important not to jump to conclusions, right? You can't just assume that because of someone's reaction to trauma that they're involved. But her aversion to blood, even before she knew the cause of death,
Yeah, that's bizarre.
that's a red flag. It suggests a knowledge of the circumstances that goes beyond what she's admitting.
Right. So she knows more than she's letting on.
Right.
And then this is when the investigation takes a really dramatic turn, right?
Yes.
Because they uncover Angelina's affair.
Yeah, with Michael Clark.
with Michael Clark,
Another Air Force recruiter
who had worked alongside Jason.
alongside Jason, yeah.
That's crazy.
And, this wasn't a casual fling.
Right.
I mean, it had been going on for years.
They even went on a couples cruise.
They went on a couples cruise with both of their spouses.
What? That is wild.
So when you add that element of a long-standing affair to the mix,
Yeah.
you have to start considering all the motives that it introduces.
Yeah, like was it jealousy?
Was it jealousy? Was there, a desire to eliminate Jason as an obstacle to their relationship?
Right.
Or, was it something more calculated, like custody battle?
Financial gain.
Yeah, financial gain.
Yeah.
All these things have to be considered. It's also crucial to look at Angelina's personality.
Right. Right.
Did she exhibit manipulative tendencies?
Yeah, any narcissism.
Exactly. All these are factors that investigators consider.
And just when you think, okay, this story can't get any more wild, Michael Clark does something totally shocking. He calls the police
And confesses.
and confesses.
But his confession, it's not about his own involvement.
Right.
He's basically just casually mentioning to the police that Angelina talked about killing Jason. A lot.
Whoa.
And I quote, "Oh yeah, she talks about killing her husband all the time."
That's chilling.
So chilling.
And it gets worse.
Yeah, it gets worse.
Because Clark reveals that they'd actually discussed various methods of murder.
Oh yeah.
I mean, poisoning, stabbing, shooting. They even practiced dragging a body.
It's like something out of a crime novel.
It's crazy. And his nonchalant admission, it raises a lot of questions about Clark's involvement, right?
Yeah.
Because, he had an alibi for the night of the murder. He was stationed in Texas. But his willingness to just, divulge all this incriminating information about Angelina.
It's suspicious.
Yeah. So based on Clark's confession, the police decide, all right, we're going to use him in a sting operation. They wire him up. They send him to meet Angelina at a hotel room.
Hoping to get that confession on tape.
Yeah, classic sting operation. But sting operations like that, they're risky business.
Oh, they are, yeah.
You're really walking a fine line, hoping that your cooperating witness can elicit a confession, but without tipping off the target. There's a lot that can go wrong.
A lot can go wrong.
And in this case, it does.
Oh, yeah.
Because Angelina senses that something's off. She even destroys the recording devices that they had planted.
It's like she knew.
Yeah, she knew.
And her behavior during that encounter, it's so telling. At one point, she turns to the detective and says, "I could do your job better than you."
Oh.
That defiance, coupled with her earlier comments and strange behavior, it points to a potential narcissistic personality disorder.
Interesting. Okay, so even though that sting operation failed, the police are starting to build a really solid case against Angelina. They use luminol, that chemical that detects trace amounts of blood, and it reveals cleaned up blood stains under the living room couch.
Oh, wow.
Then they find grass clippings on Jason's body that match the clippings in the Hamrich's backyard.
Okay.
And then remnants of a tarp are discovered near their pool.
So the investigators did a remarkable job connecting these seemingly disparate pieces of evidence. You've got the bloodstains under the couch. That confirms that that's the crime scene.
Right.
The tarp suggests that his body was wrapped and dragged.
Okay.
And then those grass clippings corroborate that the body was moved from the house to the ditch.
Wow. They really...
It's like a puzzle, right?
Yeah, it's like they're putting together this puzzle. And then not only that, they find Angelina's internet search history, and she's looking up things like how to dispose of a body.
And best ways to clean up blood.
Yeah. And then they find surveillance footage of her buying cleaning supplies.
It's like those seemingly mundane actions captured by her digital footprint. They paint a very disturbing picture.
Yeah, for sure. And then on top of that, you've got the testimony of the winery owners.
Oh, right.
Who recall Angelina making some, let's say, unsettling comments about Jason's disappearance.
Even suggesting that he may have run off with another woman.
So it really sounds like the prosecution had a very strong case against Angelina, but bringing her to justice wasn't going to be easy.
You're right. There were some significant challenges ahead. And unfortunately, some of the judge's rulings ended up playing a major role in how the case unfolded. So one of the biggest hurdles for the prosecution was this decision from the judge that prohibited any discussion of the divorce and Angelina's conversations about killing Jason.
Yeah, that seems like, wouldn't that be crucial information for the jury?
You would think, right? How can they fully grasp the case without that context,
To understand the potential motive.
Exactly.
Well, unfortunately, I mean, from the court transcripts that you sent me, it doesn't really go into a whole lot of detail about why the judge made that ruling.
But judges can exclude certain types of evidence if they think it's going to unfairly prejudice the jury or mislead them.
I see.
So maybe, in this case, the judge thought that if they knew about those conversations about killing Jason,
Right.
or even just the fact that they're going through a divorce,
Yeah.
the jury would just convict her without really considering the evidence.
Okay, so the prosecution really had to be careful about what they presented then.
Exactly.
So what were they able to use? What evidence did they present?
Well, despite those limitations, they still did a good job.
Okay.
They laid out all that forensic evidence we talked about, the blood stains, the tarp, her internet searches,
Yeah.
what the winery owners had said.
Yeah, all that stuff is pretty damning on its own.
It is.
But I imagine the most like heart-wrenching part of the whole trial must have been the testimony from Jason's sons.
Oh,
I mean,
absolutely.
they were home that night.
They were right there.
Can you imagine having to take the stand and testify against your own mother?
Yeah. And the oldest son, I mean, he was only 7 at the time.
Well,
And he described seeing his father on the couch with a pillow over his face.
oh my God.
He knew something was wrong.
I can't even imagine.
And that detail, along with the gunshot residue that was found on a pillow they recovered from the scene,
Right.
it suggests that she was trying to muffle the sound of the gunshot.
Oh, that's just awful.
Awful. And it speaks to like a level of premeditation that's just hard to fathom.
And the fact that those kids were right there, just outside in the backyard,
Right there.
completely oblivious.
It's just devastating to think about.
It's just devastating. So, I mean, what happens to kids who go through something like that? What kind of support systems are in place for them?
Well, there are organizations that help kids who've experienced this kind of trauma,
Okay.
especially kids who have been victims of violence or witnessed it.
Right.
So, I mean, Child Protective Services would have been involved to make sure the boys were safe and, getting the help that they need.
Okay.
And hopefully they've been able to get trauma-informed therapy
Yeah, I really hope so.
to help them, work through the grief and all those complex emotions they must be feeling.
Absolutely. So, what about Michael Clark? Did he end up testifying against Angelina?
He did, but his testimony was kind of a double-edged sword.
Oh, okay. How so?
Well, I mean, on the one hand, he provided some really valuable insights into Angelina's state of mind before the murder.
Right.
He talked about their conversations about killing Jason and her phone call where she confessed.
Right.
But then on the other hand, his own involvement, the whole sting operation,
Yeah.
kind of raises questions about his credibility.
Yeah, for sure.
So it's like the prosecution is trying to use his testimony,
Right.
but they also have to acknowledge that, he might be biased.
Right. And he's not exactly reliable.
Exactly.
So, it sounds like a really tricky case to present.
It was, yeah.
And the jury, did they reach a verdict?
They did, yeah.
Okay.
After like days of deliberating, they found Angelina guilty of aggravated murder,
Wow.
and she was sentenced to life in prison with the possibility of parole after 33 years.
Well, I guess it's a victory, but it's bittersweet
It is, yeah.
because it doesn't bring Jason back, and his kids are still going to have to live with this for the rest of their lives.
Exactly. And there's another layer to this story that we haven't really touched on yet,
Huh?
What about Angelina herself?
Right.
Was there like any remorse?
Yeah. Any indication as to why she would do this?
That's what we need to look at.
Mm-hmm.
From what I read in those court transcripts, Angelina was pretty stoic throughout the whole trial.
Really?
Yeah, emotionless, like no visible remorse at all.
Wow.
And it's hard to know what to make of that.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, some people might see it as cold-hearted, like, oh, she's guilty. But others might say it's a defense mechanism, a way to cope.
I mean, it's going to be hard to process something like that.
Exactly.
But it is almost more unsettling than if she had broken down,
Oh, yeah.
It's like, what was going on in her head? What led her to this point?
Right. And that's where it gets complicated, right? Because we can speculate all we want about her motives.
Sure.
Jealousy, rage, maybe she just wanted control.
Yeah, who knows?
But without a confession or like a deeper psych evil, we may never really know why.
It's just such a tragic end to a story that started, with so much promise.
Right.
They had this loving family, this seemingly perfect life,
Mm-hmm.
and then it's all just shattered by infidelity and betrayal and violence.
Yeah. This case really shows us how complicated relationships can be, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, the consequences when things spiral out of control.
Yeah.
Because Jason and Angelina's marriage, clearly it fell apart over time.
Right.
The communication stopped, resentment built up.
The affair.
Yeah, the infidelity just erodes everything. And it's just a sad reminder that even the strongest relationships can fall apart under pressure like that.
Yeah, and you know what else I think this case really highlights
What's that?
is that domestic violence, it can take so many forms,
Oh, absolutely.
and the perpetrators aren't always who we think.
Right.
I mean, Jason's case really challenges the stereotype, right?
It does, yeah.
Because he was the victim of abuse and manipulation.
And we tend to think of domestic violence as physical,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
But the emotional and psychological abuse, it can be just as bad. I mean, it leaves scars that might never fully heal.
absolutely. So I guess, I mean, what can we learn from all of this, from Jason's story? What can we take away and apply to our own lives, to our own relationships?
Well, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that we need to communicate.
Yeah, communicate openly and honestly.
Right, because when communication breaks down, that's when things start to spiral.
Yeah.
That's when resentment builds and people fall into these destructive patterns.
And I think we also need to be more aware of like the signs of abuse,
Yes.
both physical and emotional, and encourage people to talk about what a healthy relationship looks like.
Absolutely. And if you see something, if you're worried about someone, don't be afraid to say something.
Yeah, talk to somebody.
Talk to a friend, a family member, professional, anyone,
Mm.
because you never know. Speaking up might just make all the difference.
Jason's story is just a powerful reminder, right? Life is fragile,
It is.
and we need to cherish our loved ones. And I hope, even though this was a difficult case,
Mhm.
I hope this deep dive will stay with everyone listening.
Oh, yeah.
And make us think about the complexities of relationships and the signs of abuse and the impact that violence has on families and entire communities.
Yeah, because it's not just the individuals involved, right? It
Yeah.
ripples outward.
Exactly. It affects everyone. Well, thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the Jason Hamrich case. It was a tough conversation, but it was important.
It was.
And as always, everyone listening, stay curious, keep asking questions. We'll see you next time.